Welcome back to the Common Sense Show. Today we're talking wealth because, heck, it's fun. Wealth is awesome. It's amazing. Everyone strives for it. It's harder today than it was, 3-4 years ago. And it might be even more difficult 15 years from now. But what I find is that as long as you have a strategy and you have a person who can help you out like a compass, then you're more likely to be successful. We are talking wealth today on the Common Sense Show. But before we get into our interview, just a reminder that this is for educational purposes only. This is not advice. And if you are interested in what our guest today has to say about wealth and some of the strategies that he uses, I suggest that you talk to your own financial professional or you reach out to him directly, and he will guide you in a way that is appropriate for you individually. But let's get into our interview right now. All right, I'd like to welcome Tyson Ray to the show. Tyson, it's been a long time coming. I think we booked this podcast a while ago, but I'm excited. When I saw your information come across my desk, I was like, I got to get this guy on the show.
Happy to be here.
So, Tyson, you are you're the founder of Form Wealth Advisors. Now, is Form a acronym, or is it just?
Yeah, Form was. I actually took it out of a book about 20 some years ago, and then adjusted it just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So the Form F and Form stands for family. And the idea with wealth is that family transfers up and down family trees, right? You
Mm-hmm.
receive some inheritance, hopefully from your folks. You then pass it down to people that you love. But and in the end, family is most important to most people, family and friends. So the F and Form stands for family. The O stands for occupation. A lot of people's wealth is built in their business or built in their occupation or the retirement plan and those types of things. Your last occupation, we like to say, is retirement. And the R stands for recreation. And those are the hobbies and things that evolve in life and they kind of evolve in probably 3 to 5 year increments. You either get bored with them or you physically can't do them anymore, or something new comes along you like better. And so we like to know what those are. And then the M stands for the mission or the legacy or what you want to, the impact you kind of want to have on the world. And the purpose of our firm is to basically constantly be monitoring the form your life is taking to then manage your wealth around that, because often those are the things that are most important to people, or what they're doing with their money that needs to be understood before we start managing anything.
Awesome. That's amazing. And I like it. There's so many acronyms out there that they don't stand for anything, or it's just like, oh, it stands for the air or something. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you even get into wealth advising? Because nobody just shows up. It's like one of those towns that there's no direct highway access to. So you have to get off the highway, drive another hour to get to. How do you get into wealth advising? What was your path?
So I grew up with an eviction notice on my refrigerator. So first, it's like when you don't have any wealth or you have a good little experience of poverty, all of a sudden the area that I grew up in is in a suburb. A suburb of Chicago. It's just across the border in Wisconsin, actually. But you basically was a city of have-nots and haves. And I was a have-not lying on my work application when I was 12, that I was 13 or 14 or whatever the requirement was to bust tables to start, trying to make $100 a weekend. The best part was you could eat fish fry on Friday night and all you could eat peeled shrimp on Saturday. It was like I was the king. I was getting money and leaving with my belly full, but it allowed me to interact with some folks. And by the time I was 16, I had realized, hey, I need to start doing something with these savings I was putting in my chubby chipmunk bank account. And I was so excited about my little interest I was getting. But when I finally got dropped off one day with a gentleman who gave me a ride home from work in his Ferrari, I lied at what house I lived at because I was embarrassed. And before I got out of the car, I just said, how did you do this? What did you do? And he's like, well, I was successful in my business, but I really did well in my investments. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's, well, stocks. It's like, okay. So I went back and, the high school at the time, I was 16 at the time, the high school was having a stock market game. So I got caught up in that, where they give a bunch of kids a bunch of funny money and they pick a bunch of stocks. They teach the total wrong fundamentals. The whole game is how much money you can make as fast as you can make it, which is not how wealth is built, but that's what the game was.
Right.
Coming out of that, I wanted to buy a stock that I had been tracking. This was back when you actually track things in the paper. Like there was no computer to go to see what it was doing every day. You actually got the computer or the paper the next day to see what it did yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to call somebody to find out what today's price was. But I wanted to buy a company that had gone from $12 to $7 a share. And I figured how much money I could buy to buy 100 shares. And I wanted to buy this stock. It was Intel at the time. I didn't know what Intel was. It wasn't inside anything. This is back in the middle 80s. And it turns out I had to get my mom's permission. Well, my mom is trying to not lose the house, and she's trying to raise us 4 kids with dad gone and no child support, none of that. And I was like, hey, I want to buy a stock. And she's like, no. I was like, I drag her in to see the stockbroker, and like, we have no money. So she's wondering what we're doing. And thank God this person actually took the time to meet with me and convinced my mom, okay, we'll let him put $100 a month into 2 mutual funds. And that's how I got started in investing and in wealth. And when I kind of found my path in college and kind of got my bearings on values and ethics and putting people's interests first and everything that comes along with just a core belief system that I think most people need to have to go into this business.
Mm-hmm.
I decided that I had spent the last 6 years trying to convince my mom why what I was doing was making sense and it was working. That I decided maybe I should go into financial services and try and help other people realize why they should invest something or how to get out of poverty or how to do something. And it has been 25 years of just an amazing career of helping people. And I've written 2 books with one coming out here at the end of October that we're very excited about. And but that's how I got started.
Wow, that's what a story. It's almost just like that scene in The Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith.
Yeah.
Where he sees the guy pull up in the Ferrari and he goes, "What do you do and how do you do it?" Right?
That's
like
right. Yes. Yeah. I wasn't the movie depicted a life. I didn't have that struggle. But that was a great movie. And at the end, the hard part for me with that whole movie is, and the reason I wrote this book called Total Relationship is I feel the whole culture of financial services and Wall Street and the sale and cold calling people and product and pushing is so distracting from fundamentals that really need to be put in place for people to really build wealth and really have a relationship with someone who's not there to sell you last week's winning lotto numbers for a fee. Or said differently, not sell you past performance, but someone that's really there to help you go, okay, when are we going to need that 50 grand to buy that next car? Is it next summer or is it next fall? Or what about that home improvement or how are we paying off that debt relative to, you can't do everything.
All right.
And the biggest mistake I think advisors are making is they're not paying enough attention to when clients need lump sum or major purchases, or they're trying to invest too much of the money and not first focus on what shouldn't be invested, what shouldn't I be paid on, what should be sanctified and cash in the bank. So that way, when the markets sell off, you don't have to call me to go because you're afraid that you can't afford whatever because whatever you needed was already set aside. And we created a process and we wrote a book around how to try and help advisors go about that. And we actually try to write it in such a way that a client could read it and try and realize what they should be expecting out of their advisor's relationship and what the advisor's value add should be than what the markets keep telling us or the industry keep telling us, which is product or safety or some rate of return or some comparison of some index looking backwards instead of the life you're trying to live.
So let's take a few steps back because I want to talk about the building blocks that you talked about in your book, Total Relationship. What are, in your opinion, the building blocks of wealth, and why is it that wealth advisors don't agree on what those building blocks are?
Yeah, I think the pillars, as I talk about it in the book, is the form. Before you get to the money side of things, it's first understanding the family, the occupation, the recreation, the mission people have in life, what they're called to be doing. And I'll give you an example. It's like early in most of things I've either learned from somebody else or I screwed up and had to learn the hard way and then realized that's not to do it again. It's like, so a pillar of understanding of how to help a client is to understand what they're going through. And so I was calling and doing the required annual review. Mike, it's Tyson. How you doing? I'm calling. And instead of saying, here, I want to do the annual review and talk about your portfolio, what we say is, hey, I'm calling to, check in. Yep. Just first and foremost, any changes in the family. And the reason why is, like, if your mom or dad just got diagnosed with stage 4 something or other, or passed away, heaven forbid, right? Or something happened to one of your kids, like, it's a very broad brush, but it's an open-ended question, because guess what? If some of those relationships are life and death, or having a major impact on you right now, talking about your money is the last thing we want to be talking about.
Right.
Same thing. That you lose your job, you got a promotion. So, it's really simple to basically rattle them off, and we dive deeper into them, and depending on which meeting we're having with a client. But just anything with going on with the family, everything good with the job, you still planning on taking that vacation, you still working out, taking care of your health, right? Any changes with your health there? Because recreations, some people's recreations is workout, and recreations, if you're not healthy, you can't do them, right? We still on track, you still volunteering at such and such, so hitting the form people's life is the foundation to which then we can talk about the wealth.
Right.
So
outside of that relationship and understanding how these individuals are actually managing life in general, because someone, picks up a drug habit or something in between, or I've been struggling with, that's relevant to wealth building, because, they'll be in recovery for the rest of their life, and they'll have to be careful, but it also could cost them. And maybe it has cost them something, and you have to figure that out. So it's a good point that some of what perhaps people would call the soft science of wealth building actually matters just as much as the hard science of the formulas and the algorithms to try to beat the stock market and get more money, get more higher returns.
Yeah. And it's also in those categories, if you will, is where most people are spending their money, right? So part of the building blocks of wealth, the most important building block of wealth, is the cash you need to fund the life you want. Right. And so the biggest mistakes I've ever made as an advisor, because I didn't know any better, I was taught to go sell products. So here, you got money, I'll put it in this product and get a commission. And that's how I was taught to do the business. That was the movie,
right?
Pursuit of Happiness. That was how the whole industry was set up that way. Now now it may not be a commission, it may be some type of fee. But the point is that, okay, here we got you started. We're saving a couple $1,000s a year, and we're setting it aside, and we're doing what we're doing. And all of a sudden I get this phone call, and it's time to buy the car, or the car broke, or the tree fell on the roof, or whatever. And there was no emergency fund, because I didn't know to pay attention to that. And so now the market's down 20%, and they're liquidating their investment. And I actually lost the money and got paid to lose the money because they didn't know any better.
Right.
And so the building blocks of wealth are making sure you have the right cash reserve set aside based on what you're seeing your needs being, which people get real clear on what they're doing this month, next 6 months, between now and the end of the year. You can go out kind of 12 months and put a pretty broad brush: home improvements, automobiles, educational expenses, notes, debt coming due, those types of things, vacation. Where's that coming from? Those are dollars I don't want to have invested in anything. And if we earmark and help each other agree that money is sanctified and set aside in some bank account or some account that we call a cash reserve account, which is to basically be that cushion that you need, what that does is it allows the clients to not overreact to market fluctuations. Because what I learned was clients would come in and tell me they were upset because their portfolio fluctuated 50 grand, and that was their next car. And so they'd come and say, you lost my car, because that's how they're emotionally connecting them doing the math. And what I realized is, wait, if we can identify you need the car, so this money's sitting over here, now it's just fluctuation, and they couldn't attach the downtrend or the temporary loss of value of their portfolio back to something tangible, because the tangibles were funded. And that's where the biggest building block that I don't think advisors pay enough attention to is cash. We literally, and in the book, encourage part of the relationship is knowing, hey, Micah, what you got in bank? And what's that cash reserve balance you want to have, so you don't have to worry. You can pay the bills, or you got an emergency, you got it covered. And then every time we're talking to the clients, we're checking in, is that still there? It's not because I want it, right? But if it's not, or it's gotten dinged because life happens, it's like, hey, do we need to fill that back up? Or how are we going to fill that back up? And it's counterintuitive, but there's so much value add to that. It's counterintuitive because everybody thinks the value add is, here I beat some index for the last 6 to 12 months or 2 years, when really clients aren't really worried or thinking, how well did I do going backwards? People are worried about how am I going to pay for this in the next 6 to 12 months?
Right.
And
How do
so
you, how do
go
you
ahead.
how do you get a person to move away from the thought that, so we know that there is the narrative out there that your money should be working for you and it should be returning on the work that you apply it to, which we fundamentally is true. We understand that. But it's hard to ignore the fact that after the third quarter report of Berkshire, Warren Buffett is sitting on $147 billion worth of cash. So that
Yep.
cash right now is not going anywhere for him until he's ready to deploy it in what he considers to be a buyer's market, or buyer's options. When do you how do you advise your clients when it comes to the balance between cash on hand and when to buy, and to make the choice to separate themselves from the cash that they're holding and to apply it to something that might return for them capital?
Yeah. So two things to that. One is, on the cash side, is basically getting clients to agree to, okay, I want this much in checking, I want this much in savings. And then we're asking where those balances are at, or we're encouraging them that if this much is in checking and this much is in savings, then we can identify what's investable.
Right.
And so at the end of every month, I want you to send me, or if we identify, hey, we're going to pull to basically start setting aside what those investment dollars are, keeping in mind that there's $1 trillion or more of marketing that's going on the planet to try and encourage everybody to spend it on something.
Mhm.
And the idea is to kind of give them, without that influence, a cash management plan. From that, one of the things we started doing 2005, 6, 7 was I switched over to discretionary management.
Mhm.
And the reason for that is because then once the clients are identifying what goes across the line into the investments, we're then managing those investments. So like Buffett, who has cash set aside, which about a year ago, when it was August, it was Jackson Hole 2022 that Powell came out and said, I'm raising rates, and the markets weren't expecting that.
Right.
Is when we liquidated our bond holdings and went to cash, but we were able to do it with discretion. We can do it across the board for every client, whether you have 100,000 or 10 million with us, you're getting the same experience, because discretion gives me the ability not to go call everybody.
Right.
And one of the molds that are broken in this industry is these advisors that, okay, fill out this questionnaire, right? So Mikey, you got to fill out these questions to then create this number or some score that then equals this model or portfolio. Now the advisor is going to go hire some manager to manage that portfolio within that criteria.
Right.
That's your objective. The problem with that is, well, that model didn't change in the last 2 months or 2 years when interest rates went from 0 to 5%, because it's still going to be that asset allocation model. And what discretion gives us the ability to do is realize, when does the model need to change, separate from the questionnaire, separate from how you feel.
Mhm.
Because to your point, Buffett's sitting on a bunch of cash because he's looking at market valuations. And oh, by the way, I had to go back to my early career in 1999 was the last time you were getting 5.5% in cash on your, and you got up to 6.5%. No one wanted it because you were doing 3 times that in the NASDAQ, right? Nobody wanted it, or your tech stock.
CDs are at what, 5.1% right now? A buddy of mine just told me that he's like, I'm on the way to the bank. I said, for what? He said, because CDs are paying out 5.5% basically at the moment.
Yeah.
Like,
the problem with that is and people have to be careful though with all or nothing decisions, because the last time you had the opportunity to do that, which is in 2007, when that CD came due, your 5% CD came due and you were earning less than 1% again. And between 07 and when you actually came due, the market actually had quite the rate of return greater than 5%.
And your cash is locked.
your cash is locked, and you feel right because the markets have been sideways for the last 2 years. So we haven't crossed the all-time high of January of 22. So it feels like markets aren't working. Things aren't doing any good. Well, depending how long you lock that CD in, if the markets start working again, because valuations come back in line, earnings come back in line, the world comes back in line, the struggle between the Fed raising rates and market valuations, et cetera, the elections are going to come in a year and that'll may change some paradigms.
Yep.
You got it. All I'm saying is that you need to be careful how people like to make all or nothing decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I did it. I locked it all up in a CD. I feel good at 5%. Well, until 5 years later, you missed the opportunity to make 10 or 15. Right. So,
right.
And that's where, again, an advisor can try and help clients see past the decision today.
Yeah.
Our desire and part of having a total relationship with a client is just simply, let's not regret in the future the decisions we're making in the present.
It's kind of why I like your strategy where so I live in Boston, so obviously I'm a New England Patriots fan, obviously. It's hard these days. I understand the pain that the rest of the country felt when Tom Brady was here. But one of the things that, Bill Belichick preaches in training camp is you can't win the game until you can keep from losing it. And I like your approach to cash management. It's a fundamental skill, like blocking. That's blocking and tackling. If you're on defense, you have to learn how to tackle. If you're on offense, you got to learn how to block. And your approach to cash management or to manage cash is a fundamental skill for individuals who are impulsive, because it's going to teach them some form of self-control that they may not otherwise have, given, as you mentioned about the CD thing. Oh, I see 5% and I'm going to chase the ball because it's 5%, right? And without thinking of, yeah, but you're also simultaneously handcuffing all that cash, and you could miss an opportunity that could be more valuable, I think, to your point.
Well, and the other thing that we try and help, we all forgot math. We forever had to take it. We took it, we learned it, we passed it, and then we have our phone for simple calculations.
Mm-hmm.
But we forgot, if I was going to retitle if I write another book, I want to write it, and it's basically going to be called Compared to What? Because when I used to ask my grandmother how my grandfather was doing, she'd always say, compared to what? So part of hey, I'm going to go lock this in at 5%. And it's just like, okay, but now we need to compare that 5% to something else for a minute. And one of the things that most people don't think about is, let's make sure we're comparing rates of return that are real. Let's compare the rate of return that you're really going to experience, which is what real returns are. Real returns in finance are real returns that net inflation out of them. Right. So, okay, if we're going to have a 5% CD, but we have a 3% interest or inflation rate, it's not exactly the math because of how you divide and add and subtract to get the calculation. You just don't subtract the 3. But for simple sake, now your real return is not 5. It's going to be 2. Actually, it's going to be a little less than 2. And so people need to by the way, inflation's at 3.5, closer to 4. And it's like, why are rates so high? Well, because inflation's high. When inflation was basically 1%, you earned 1% in the bank, your real return was 0, meaning your real return for the future of your money is still close to 0 in cash if inflation stays high.
Right.
And everybody forgets that. I'm making 5%. Well, guess what? If your bag of groceries 5 years from now goes up by 5%, your real return on your growing your cost, you're growing your purchasing power isn't happening.
Yeah, it's so good to put them in a position to understand. And I guess it's easy to do it with their own life, right? It's like, okay, well, let's say that you're retired, and let's say you were earning, 10% on $100,000 a year, and you could live off of that $10,000, let's just say, for the year. You can't, but in this example, you can't. Inflation is currently at 2%, which means of that $10,000, $2,000 has degraded your ability to purchase. Yep. But if that number goes up, then it further degrades the amount of money that you could otherwise pay for it's the tax that you never asked for.
Right.
But it just shows up.
And what everybody was missing, and what you could see coming depending on what you were paying attention to. When COVID happened, they shut the economy down. And in my opinion, every person on the planet panicked. This was life or death, right? And even our politicians panicked. And so they decided first to shut down the economy. Then they decided to give everybody money to calm us all down. We couldn't spend it on anywhere. Well, we were all trying to buy toilet paper. Everybody forgets that. It's like we couldn't, like the best investment in February, March of COVID was a good old bag of Charmin, right? I mean, just you got your toilet paper. If you buy a bunch, you could sell it. Anyway,
True.
When they gave the amount of money they gave businesses and individuals that they first announced was it was more than all of the financial stimulus of the past decade or more combined. And it was like, hey, some economists were like, this is going to be stimulus, like this is going to create inflation, right? Give a bunch of people money. And so you could see this coming. And the funny thing about inflation is you can't fight inflation once it shows up. You have to fight inflation before it happens. Right? By the time it shows, you're making your 10,000 in your example, right? You're making your 10 grand. All of a sudden inflation went to 9 and you didn't adjust. Guess what? You're going to feel that.
Oh yeah.
And so it just helping people, again, cash needs to have a component for what you need to spend a day. It has never been historically a great long-term investment. Now, that doesn't mean Buffett's wrong. It's just the other thing I would point out is Buffett's cash position relative to his total holdings is a fraction of what people are thinking.
Sure.
Because it's billions. It's like, that's so much money. I should have a bunch of money in cash. It's like, time out. My guess is it's a couple percentage points at the most of what his total wealth is. And it's more about what he's deploying that cash for, not selling investments to create cash.
Right.
But people forget that the money that the government gave us in COVID, the only historical example of that was coming out of World War II, and two things happened. The only way the government pays off debt, if they don't pay it off, is they have to pay it off by raising taxes, or they inflate it away. And so they're inflating it away by letting interest rates run hot for a little, or letting inflation run hot for probably a little too long, calling it transitory. And here we are. But the longer inflation runs, it means that future inflated dollars get to pay off existing debt with the inflated dollar. It's one of the ways that we can basically come out the other side of this okay. And they have to be careful because the 50s and 60s were great. The 70s were the hangover. And that's where you had that runaway inflation. And what I also think is that you have an environment now where everything happens faster. It's not going to take 2 decades for this to play out. It's going to probably take the rest of the couple years for this to play out because just technology allows everything to happen faster than it used to.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's close to right. I mean, right now people are, people who are firmly in the middle class are feeling the pinch. I mean, now a gallon of milk is, $7-8. $9, some places, depending on where you go. I mean, the fact that gas is still over $7 a gallon in some places it's unbelievable.
But here's what's crazy about that. So I agree on the general statement, but here's what I find is amazing after 25 years is I have some clients in the middle class. I have some clients that, one of them they made less than $50,000. She stayed home. They have like 5 kids. But for whatever reason, before they were both 30, they had paid off it was a $200,000 house. It wasn't like some palace, but they got it paid off. Their cars are paid off. They're saving money. And why? I actually asked them, like, what are some of, like, just out of curiosity, tell me some of the things you do to save money. They said, we turn the house down to 60 at night. I'm like, in the winter? They're like, yeah, we have a lot of blankets. I'm like, okay. Right. I mean, just, they drive their cars till they're like dead, like just falling apart. They do a lot of their own home improvements, paint, fix a piece of trim, figure out figure out how to fix it. Right.
Yep.
And it's like, they've built like wealth. Like they built wealth that I have couples that are making 3 times what they make that they can't save $1. And so there's this aspect of, part of, Alan Greenspan said in the 2003, I think it was, the future of retirement in America, the American is responsible for their own retirement. We've made promises. This was the quote. We made promises to upcoming generations of people that we're going to be unable to fulfill. And meaning, if it's meant to be, it's up to you and me. Like, you got to do it yourself, which means you got to stop spending. Like, part of building wealth is don't spend more than you make. Start there. Check the box, right? And it's a facade to put $100,000 over here and go to $200,000 debt over here.
What is the it's a mental game, it seems like. Is that what you find when people meet with you?
I sit down with folks. My favorite line to people is, especially, they've saved some debt, they've saved some pile of cash in some emergency. They have 50, 100,000, they have some money saved in a bank, and they feel really good about it until I realize they have like a $200,000 home equity line of credit that's fully tapped. And it's like, you were for a decade or more earning nothing in your cash in the bank, but you're paying 3 or 4%. Now, okay, you're getting 5 in your cash, but you're paying 9 on your home equity loan. And I'm like, pay it off. Oh, well, but we need the cash. I'm like, well, if you need the cash, you just take whatever little bit you need back off, but pay it off. I'm like, you have and my analogy is basically, it's like, okay, you have a 50-foot pile of dirt and you have a 50-foot hole. Fill the hole in. And if they don't like that one in the end, I'm like, hey, guess what? I'm not paid to tell you that, right? Like, pay off your debt. Like, well, I'm a financial advisor that gets paid to basically manage money for a fee if we decide we're even going to work together.
Right.
And I'm saying, pay off your debt. No one's paid to tell you that anymore. The bank makes money on the spread, right?
Yep.
But yeah, no, there are certain debts that houses, the cars, when they were at 0%, when a car payment is now 8 or 9, no, save up, buy the car. Like, this is crazy.
Not even to mention that they have now modified the rules around auto loans, where you can have multiple auto loans now because of the difficulty in getting them. And now some auto finance products are extending payments for 10 years. I just found this out the other day. I almost passed out when I heard that.
Isn't that nice? The car won't be running, but you can still pay on it.
And then you would have had to buy a new car because the other car died. And so now you have this car that's like a beater, and like you still have like another 4 years left on the car that just died on you. Well,
I can say they modified mortgages coming out of the financial crisis proved that was not the best idea.
Yeah, it is amazing. So how early do you think a person who is looking to build wealth should actually, when should they choose to work with a wealth advisor? Do you think that this is something that anyone who is now working full time, post college, or just after trade school should begin? Do you think it's something that they need to be at a certain place to do so? What's your take on a suggested place for them to enter into this advisory world?
Yeah, so I think the vast majority of people that are going to get started trying to save money for retirement or for their future already has access to an advisor, and they just don't realize it, in the form of the vast majority of people that are employed have access to some type of 401k plan. The government has made it much easier for those to be rolled out. Most businesses are being incentivized to have them. And most of them have an advisor or have a service or have an 800 number. And most people that are accumulating wealth or even just getting started, the benefit of saving money and both avoiding taxes on money that goes in the 401k, and then also having, well, if I put $1 in up to a certain amount, the employer may put $1 on top of that. There's maybe some terms to that, but the concept of the incentives that are out there for people to get a 401k or get matching money, the outside of credit card debt, so if your credit card debt's now that's another thing to pay attention to. Credit card debt's gone from about 18% to I think 25 to 30, somewhere in there, depending on your credit quality, and people aren't paying any attention. Anyway, outside of credit card debt, which is where we kill that first, outside of that, student loans that are 8% or lower, your home equity loan, your mortgage that are tax deductible, to some extent the car loans, although those are getting higher, that would be concerning. As you get, this is the best strategy we try and tell people. Your next pay raise, save half of it in a retirement account. You can take half of it in, so you got the raise, you get to feel a little bit of it. It's like you got a smaller raise, what it feels like. But watch that statement that you start putting that money in compound, especially if it gets matched, and get excited about, like, that's contagious. That's your future. Start there, and the advisors that are over those plans have fiduciary duties to help you pick what fund you should be in, how to get started, whether or not it makes sense. And a lot of plans are set up in such a way that if you have an emergency, you can stop funding it for a little bit or turn it back on, those types of things. And that's where we try and encourage people to start. And if you don't feel like you can do it now, or as we I tell advisors, it's like, tell your client or tell our clients' kids, it's like, hey, your pay raise, when you get your next pay raise, put half of it away like you didn't get it. And if you can do that every time, you'll quickly build wealth in ways that you wouldn't otherwise. Plus that money goes and is saved before you get to touch it.
Yeah.
A lot of people have a hard time giving back the money. When that money hits that bank account, whether it's, now it's electronically hitting the account, it doesn't matter. When it shows up on your phone, it's yours in your bank account. Then you're thinking where I'm going to spend it.
Mm-hmm. And
the idea is to not have it go in that account. Have that extra go into these other accounts first.
What do you think that, I was going to ask you basically to kind of draw that out a little bit more. Like, what do you think that when a person locks away cash into a retirement account, after the point that is it's matched, or after the point that it's beneficial, do we overemphasize putting X amount of money now into retirement accounts beyond whatever the match is? Do you think it needs to be emphasized more? And are people crippling themselves by not having the cash reserves you're talking about for sake of a retirement account that they're going to be penalized for and taxed twice, essentially, for drawing down?
No, I think most people have a lot less taxable income in retirement than they have while they're working.
Mm-hmm.
And so to avoid that tax while you're working, I'm also a big believer in, I would rather defer the tax now that I know I'm going to have than hope I don't have one in the future. Because with the government continuing to go into debt, and the only way they can pay it off is to raise taxes. Municipal bond interest was tax exempt until they came up with alternative minimum income tax that added the municipal bond income back in if you make too much money. And so I would rather avoid as much of the tax I have now. And the best analogy I can say is okay, if I can avoid a tax, so let's just simplify it and say, here, you're going to avoid a 10% tax if you put the money in here, and you're going to pay that 10% tax later. Versus you pay the 10% tax now, and you could take that same money. Now, if we hold the market return constant in those two examples, if you have 90% less, you have 10% less going in the same rate of return, the dollars never catch up.
Interesting.
So you're going to have more taxes. You're going to pay more taxes later, but you're going to have more money.
Right.
Keep in mind that the Roth was created in the Clinton administration as a way to balance the budget. When they came up with the tax-free Roth, you could take money out of a plan, pay the taxes over 5 years, which was the budget they were trying to come up with, and then it was going to be tax-free. And they're spreading out over. There were some strategies, and it's not an all or nothing. There is some benefit depending on what tax brackets people are in. There's some games certainly be played, but the idea was they were able to get people to think tax-free. So by definition, I'm going to pay more taxes now to have a promise of tax-free later, but they could take the promise away.
That's nice.
So it's most like everything in life. There's nothing perfect. There's 70 different ways to do them. 68 of them are right, depending on the situation. And that's where an advisor can add value when they stop trying to sell a product and focus on who's in front of me, what do they need, what are they trying to do, and how do I make their life better?
So it seems like you kind of have a triangular, your total relationship technique. You kind of have like a triangular, I guess you can call it the triangle offense, like Phil Jackson had. You have life plan, you have wealth plan, and you have care plan. Can you just describe what you mean by each one of those buckets and why having a plan for each of those areas of your total life matters?
Yeah. So the life plan, which people would commonly misunderstand as financial planning. And it's not so much it is the classic financial planning of, okay, when are you going to retire and how long is that away and what do we have and how much are we setting aside? The ongoing application of the life plan is getting real clear on the college for the kids. When's that happening? getting real clear on, and it's cars and homes. At the end of the day, if you really boil down people's financial mistakes, it's automobiles and homes, because our mental accounting clicks in and it's just like, hey, yeah, I want the leather seats and I want the power windows and I want this and I want that and I want this. And next thing you know, you added $20,000 to the car, but you got what you wanted, right? But then they don't work. Or 2 years later, you miss the car smell, or you lease it, so you get another one. So cars. So part of the life plan is we track what are the miles in your car. Not just the debt, but what's the mile. People buy cars one of three ways. They either drive it till they're dead, which is okay. What are the miles on that? Because when the car is getting to 200, 300,000 miles, it's like we start thinking about where that money's going to come from to buy the next one. Or they 100,000 miles. Second hits 100,000 miles, I'm getting a new one. You know, so they have a mileage amount, or they have a year. Every 5 years I get a new car. Every 10 years I get a new car. It's funny. And usually by your 30s, you've fallen into a rhythm, or you took it from your parents, of how you buy cars. We're just simply trying to figure out, where's that next car coming from, especially if we brought the spouse into the situation, so then they have their rhythm of buying a car, which may or may not be the same. How close are they together? Because those little buggers are expensive.
Right. Oh, yeah. So
that life plan gets very practical. Okay, our home, are we living in it till retirement? Yes. Great. When's the roof needing to be replaced? What are you talking about? I'm not thinking about that. I'm like, well, do you have 20-year or 30-year shingles? Or why? When were they put on? Because guess what? In 3, 4, 5 years, you're going to need 15, 20 grand you're not thinking about, because these things rot. That's part of owning a house. Or how old's the furnace? Or what are the home improvements we want to do? Heaven forbid, we want to do an addition. Okay, but tell me what that is and when you want to do it. Because what we're trying to do for clients is help them live the life they want now. The greatest lesson, and this is in the book, the greatest lesson I was ever taught was the client that had millions of dollars at the end of her life, and she wished she didn't. She had all these regrets of all these things she wished she would have done, but she never had an advisor give her permission she could.
Right.
Most clients I have that have a significant amount of wealth sacrificed more than they needed to, worked longer than more than they needed to. They just never were told they could do it differently. It's like, wait, we can just start taking some of these. I had a client, she was 80, still being a librarian. All I needed to tell her was, these dividends that are reinvesting right here in your stock portfolio, which was a couple $1 million, we actually can just send those to you. Well, I always let them reinvest. Well, I understand that, but you don't have to. You can get that.
Yeah. So I was going to you actually answered my question. One of my questions I was going to ask within this framework, which was, are you ever too old to buy a house? Right. And I guess according to your answer, it's, if it fits your life plan, if it's part of the framework, then you just do it.
Yeah. Or realize that, hey, guess what? Your wealth is in a 401k plan, and you got to get a 30-year mortgage. Well, guess what? The 30-year mortgage interest rate is a lot less than the taking out all that money and paying the taxes at once. We'll just set up the 401k plan to pay the mortgage payment.
Yeah.
In the end, you get to sell the house. It doesn't matter. So that's your life plan. What is your wealth plan? Your wealth plan, going back to the concept of total relationship, first and foremost, is that the advisor's job to understand the client's relationship with fear and greed, right? Their experience or their emotion, or their how have they reacted to markets in the past? How have they reacted to cash? What's their stewardship principle? Are they too conservative? Are they too aggressive? So you have all of that going into the wealth plan. And then at the same time, the wealth plan is also the advisor's job of, to your point, with the Buffett and cash, where are interest rates? What's the real return of things? Are we setting aside and saving for the future correctly? Harvest levels, where we're coming in and realizing, hey, when the markets are at their all-time highs, and this is our process we have, I know if the market's at its all-time high. You can go back and look where the market all-time high was, and no, right now we're not at the all-time high. Okay, great. What does that mean? It means you can add to your portfolio. You can't take away anything from it. Right. Don't sell when the market's down. The number one rule, especially if you're retired, you only have so many shares when you retire. So let's sell them at the highest level possible. And the wealth plan becomes making sure we're looking into the future to go, well, if we need the $50,000 car and the market's back to the all-time high, and we're coming within a year or two of that purchase, harvest it now.
Right.
So I don't know.
Thinking ahead, essentially.
Huh?
Thinking ahead, essentially.
Yeah.
Having some level of foresight application where you don't make life at a certain age. It's like you can't just make life decisions spontaneously, because you only get so many chances to reset and have your ability to rebuild from a mistake that you made because you thought too short term.
That's it.
Yeah.
And then the care plan is our firm's job is to basically be caring for the client's life plan and wealth plan and be monitoring. It's like, instead of spending all this time giving you performance reports of the past of how we did or didn't do relative to some index. And oh, by the way, they've created so many indexes or benchmarks that I can go find something I did better than, right?
Right.
But it's looking into the future to go, okay, the markets are now here. It's time to go raise this funds. And part of the power of being on the discretionary side of things is that when we go raise money for clients, we can do it for everybody.
Right.
And so the client that's got $1,000 or $10,000 and the client's got 10 million, everyone's getting that execution. They're getting pricing at the institutional level. They're getting executions all together. Instead of, if I could tell, like these advisors that have 100, 200 clients and you're customizing every client's portfolio, you can't do this. You're putting clients at these markets are extremely volatile, and some poor clients get in an execution that's down 10, 20% from 1 month to the next by the randomness of how they're running their practice. And I'm sitting there saying, like, I'm a prophet going, please, there's a better way. Here's the book. Please just stop. You can help our people by not letting them have those executions. But the care plan is us caring for the life plan and wealth plan, and then being an advocate to try and help the client live the best life they can, to spend the money, take the vacation, be an advocate for them saving, being an advocate for being like, yes, you crushed it. You maxed your 401k. Nice job. That's what we're trying to do here. And actually also being an advocate for, hey, Micah, you taking care of yourself, right? Because this health, you got that one body, you get to be responsible for that. You okay? Everything good? Are you doing? And being an advocate, whether they got to the gym or whether they changed their diet or just, we're just encouraging each other. And those things all come into this relationship where it's like doing life together.
Right.
And that's what makes it fun. It's like, it has the money's the easy part. It's helping to understand. It's like, hey, who do you trust to basically share this information with, to basically come alongside you and to try and help you live the best life you can afford.
It is amazing just how much of money management comes down to your mind and your ability to control your behavior. And it's always the person. It's almost the money is just a tool. It will just sit there on a desk or in your bank account until you instruct it to do something. And you think about the NBA players, NFL players, they go into these leagues and then they go broke. I mean, what do they say that Mike Tyson made something like $200 million in his whole boxing career. And he lost it all. And then he ended up, of course, he's starting to make it back now again. But like during his career, the fact that he lost all that money, it shows how much, if you're not in a good mental place to either accept help or to be ready for the structure that is provided by a wealth manager, or to make the sacrifice. I mean, in some cases, it's a bit ridiculous. Like Chad Ochocinco, the former wide receiver for the Bengals. Like, this guy still is flying Spirit Airlines or whatever, like Delta, like he flies like business class Delta, which is like, $1,000 versus taking the private jets that I'm sure he could afford to take. But he's still he's on the other side that you were talking about, which is, okay, you've had the money and you don't have to go broke enjoying yourself, but you should enjoy yourself because it helps to tie in your past motivation of why you earned it, why you work so hard to. It's a rewarding behavior for the efforts that you put in over the years to accumulate that wealth.
Yeah. And part of becoming a client for us has a lot less to do with how much money you have. It has a lot to do with, do you want the help?
Yeah.
Right. Like you can coach the athlete that wants to be coached, but the person that knows it all is like, I can't help you.
Yeah. Right.
And it's funny because your analogy, you brought up Buffett earlier. It's like, he loves the fact he's buying his McDonald's breakfast with change, not change in dollars, like literally he's picking his pennies up.
Right.
And that, and he also said, similar to what you said, he's like, yeah, it does. You don't have to make it that complicated. Like it's a pretty simple strategy.
Yeah. It's amazing. If you have the stomach to sit there and watch the whole Berkshire annual meeting, it's a fascinating affair because yes, it can be tedious if you're not interested in finance. I mean, I just happen to be interested in finance and
Yep.
wealth. So like for me, sitting through like a 2 hour, a 3 hour, 4 hour, over a few days, Berkshire shareholder meeting, which has become this pop event now.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing, but you get to see the mind of Warren Buffett and Charlie Baker, Munger. Charlie Baker was a former governor of Massachusetts. Charlie Munger, and you get to see how they just think about money. That the pure enjoyment of what they do. These guys have not had to work for 60 years,
Yeah.
and yet they do it because they enjoy it, and that's way more important to them than the money. You can tell. I mean, to your point.
Well, and the best part is YouTube now is doing a great job of taking those 2 or 3 hours of meetings and breaking them up into little 5, 10, 15-minute little segments.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I could take it in.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm the same way. No, it's true. So you say that relationships, investments, and business, you can't do all three well.
Mhm.
So how do you choose between? What do you mean by that? And how do you
Yeah.
do you have to choose?
Yeah. So what happens as a financial advisor, you get started, you get your clients, you're doing your different things, but as your practice grows, right? You got basically the average advisor, I think, has between 100 and 200 households, right? So you got a couple hundred people you're taking care of. And there becomes a point where it's like, okay, you're trying to take care of your clients and service the clients, but then you're managing the money, or you've hired someone else to manage the money, but you got to track all this cash flow stuff, right? How are you doing that?
Right.
And then there's an aspect of running your business, paying the bills, hiring your staff, and when do you need to bring on others? I mean, at some point, complexity sets in. And the hard part is there may be some advisors out there, and there are. My first advisor I apprenticed underneath was a fantastic investment guy. He was really good at managing the money, but he was so optimistic and so good at managing the money. It's like the idea of setting aside cash repulsed him. Like clients were afraid to tell him. Like I went to the client, like, "What do you got in the bank?" I'm like, "I don't want to tell you." I'm like, well, "I'm not asking because I want it. I just want to know you got some, right?"
Right.
And so there's a lot of advisors and because the advisor community is declining in numbers, which means more advisors are taking on more clients, it's giving them or helping them realize or know yourself. What do you like running the business? Do you like running the money, or do you like sitting down and doing the relationship part with the client? Because if you're not liking to do the relationship part of the client, you might want to rethink how you're structuring your team or what you're doing. The other side of it's like, great, I've bought 7 practices, 6 were fantastic, 1 was a dud, and the all of them were fantastic. Like they loved their advice. The relationships were solid, but these guys were horrible at managing money. They were horrible to admit they were wrong. They'd rather just ride the investment to the ground than call the client and be like, "Yeah, maybe we should sell that."
Right.
And so there's different roles that these practices take, and part of the total relationship is to help people realize that. And then we're trying to build out resources for folks to basically backfill the areas they don't want to do. Because I've recently been coached to realize, wait, these things I don't like to do by design, God created someone that loves to do them, and let's go find the who that knows how to do some of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's smart. Smart way to go about it. I mean, if you can't do it, hire it out. Right.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't be ashamed of that. I think, I had someone on my podcast before. She was a psychologist, but she was talking about money blocks and how a lot of our behaviors now are influenced by how we were taught about money, positively, negatively, or just, observationally from when we were younger, or, from what else has happened in our life. But have you noticed that people that you work with have money blocks that they have to,
Oh yeah.
inform, like even in the most logically presented, explicit way,
Yeah.
they just can't get past themselves?
Yep, I have some client stories. The names changed for privacy reasons in the book, but 2 come to mind. One of them, he was standing over me. He was a just towering gentleman, gray hair pulled back. He was 6 plus, whatever he was. I was sitting in my chair and I was in my 20s, and he was mad. He was a retired accountant back when the accounting was the big spreadsheets and a pencil and the green hat and the candle, right? I mean, it's like, and he was upset because the computer rounded differently than our computer did by a penny.
Wow.
And I'm like, it's $1 million account. And I reached in my desk and handed him a penny. I'm like, and the real issue behind it was, he said, if I died, who's going to take care of my wife and make sure these things don't happen?
Mm.
And so sometimes these money blocks actually have some emotional thing behind them.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I found is, and this is just the truest statement ever, the smaller the dollar amount, the more tangible somebody can relate to it, emotionally connect to it. Like, you know, we had a client, they were retiring, they were rolling $1 million over, and they wanted some checking account feature, whatever, and it was $10 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And she just lost it over to $10. And I'm like, okay. Okay. And I'm like, $10. And I joked with her the other day. This was like 20 years ago. I joked with her, but she was upset. So I was like, remember the $10? I said, we're having this conversation again because you're upset about this little nickety knack and we just get hung up. But the reality is, you know, go back to the little girl, $10 was like, oh my gosh. Right. And that's part of it. I mean, part of it is their past experience with money. And part of our process is flushing out those experiences. What did money mean to you? Did you have affluent parents when you're younger? Are you getting inheritance from your kids? How were you raised? Because all that stuff plays into these decisions. And then it's partially protecting clients from those emotions and part of setting aside the wealth. I also have had clients where we have all this money and it means nothing to them until I actually stick it in their bank account.
Yeah.
You know,
So you consider it extreme, this behavior? Like, I mean, $10 a year, that's kind of like, if this woman if 3 times a year she goes to an ATM that's not associated with the bank she's in,
Yeah.
like, it's I guess it's like people put these arbitrary they get mad about these arbitrary penalties
Yep.
on things that they just don't deem are worth it, which is
Right.
weird, because they do other things that cost them way more money usually than these little quirks or these little things that pop up.
Well, and that goes back to houses and cars. I've said to many people, it's like you screw up how you buy most Americans are screwing up how they buy their house and buy their car, and then are trying to make up for it by not buying a Starbucks cup of coffee. Right.
Right.
It's like,
Yeah.
I'm going to go try and save $2 or $3 over here by not getting that cup of coffee. I'll go across the street somewhere else to try and make up for the $100,000 I shouldn't have put in the house or the 50 I bought with the new car. I could have waited a couple more years, but
So what framework should people think about right before they buy a house or a car? So, like, if we're going to give a practical suggestion to people who are listening, um, what should cause them to pause, and what should they be thinking? Just a few checklist items when they're about to buy this car or about to buy this house that should delay. Let's only deal with one issue here, which is that should delay their purchase. What would you be thinking about that would delay a purchase?
I think most people need to realize that a house is not an investment, it's a home. So go try and buy the place that you want. Warren Buffett lives in the same house,
Hmm.
right? And a lot of money gets lost in realtor fees or transactions or maintenance and upkeep. And people don't realize that when they start reaching for a bigger something, it comes with bigger bills, bigger property taxes, bigger insurance, bigger maintenance, more cleaning. And a lot of people, the size of the homes that we grew up in or the size of homes our parents grew up in is like the size of people's bedrooms now. It's like crazy. The bigger is not necessarily better. And a lot of it is, can you buy the house that gives you the location you want for the convenience of where you're going to live your life, which is not in your home? We sleep in our homes. We eat in our homes. We take showers in our homes. After that, we're usually not in our home. Actually, if you're in your home, you're sick and you don't want to even be in your home. We were all with COVID. We didn't want to be in our homes, right? So it's like bigger is not necessarily better because everybody in the end seeks to want to downsize. That's what ends up happening later in life. And so it's this impulsive keep up with the Joneses. A bigger house is not necessarily better.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Live within your means, like all those like truisms and all the richest king in Babylon
Yep.
things apply to money management. So, Tyson, how can people contact you if they want to reach out to you for private advice that's individual to them, or if they want to maybe talk to you about some other issue?
Yeah, so LinkedIn's probably the best way to reach out. We got our LinkedIn profile out there that people connect with us, especially the financial advisor space where we're trying to help teach some of this stuff to go make a greater impact. The Total Relationship book is another way that's on Amazon, coming out at the end of October. But those two places, we also, for the advisors, have a Total Relationship Advisor group where we're trying to create a culture around, hey, let's think differently than kind of the boiler room mantra that still is kind of out there in the financial services space. That's still kind of product and commission and pushing and quotas and all this other stuff, versus how can we really make people's lives better by giving the right advice and having the right relationship.
Awesome. That's amazing. And what I'll do is I will put the link to your LinkedIn and the description for this this video and the audio podcast as well. So if you're looking at this and you want to reach out to Tyson, then I'll certainly put that link in there. I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for for stopping by and sharing your wealth of wisdom. I mean, it was really inspiring to hear your thoughts on relationships and money and life, and it's very common sense strategies, which I think is what people need, especially now because there's so much extreme thought when it comes to things like money and savings and wealth and cash. And like, I feel like it's been infiltrated. Common sense wealth has been infiltrated by extreme views on how people should manage wealth. So appreciate your common sense approach.
Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. All right, that was Tyson Ray, and he is from Form Wealth Advisors. And it was a great conversation. I really did appreciate having his insights about how you can manage your money and your wealth, and how you can really frame problems surrounding cash management. And I think that his common sense approach when it comes to cash management and wealth is something that everyone who earns cash needs to approach it. The story that he gave about someone, one of his clients that didn't really make that much money, but was frankly content, comfortable, and financially well off because of their viewpoint on money is a fable that I think makes, or a real story that actually makes, it should make you think. It should make you think how you're managing your money. It should make you think about how you can, are there any things in your life that you can adjust to be able to have the things that you want later and even right now? So thank you for watching today. I appreciate it. Or thank you for listening if you're listening on audio podcasts. Until next time, if you don't go about purposefully in your business, you're going to be going about doing the business of someone else. Until next time, I'm Micah, and I'm out of here. See you later.